Good evening, everybody. Let's get started. We've got a bit of an echo. Is that better? Yes. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Audit and Standards Committee. I'm aware of apologies from Councillor Phillips and Councillor Brown, who has been substituted by Councillor Hammersley. Have we got any more apologies from anybody? We shall see if anybody turns up due to the traffic issues in the town. Everybody in the room this evening is aware of the evacuation procedure, so I will not go through the evacuation procedure. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting, and is everybody in agreement with those, and I'll sign them? He wasn't here. Can we make a note? Everybody else happy that I sign these? That sounds like somebody rushing upstairs. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that are not printed on the agenda that they wish to declare? In that case then, we shall move on to public consultation. I've been made aware that Councillor Condacore wishes to speak on items 6, 7, and he wishes to make a speech on any other business. So, moving forward to, I just said I'm sure that was the front door going. Welcome, Councillor Tromans. Item number 6, the internal audit plan. Do we have Linda online to present? Are you happy to present that then, Matt?
Thank you, Chair. So, for the committee, I'm sure the committee will be relatively familiar with this report at this time of the year. So in agenda item 6, the audit team have set out its internal audit plan draft and proposal for this committee to review today for the 2024-2025 financial year. The team have, as explained in the report itself, gone through from its risk-based approach, looking at when last audits were done and where potentially there are some higher risk areas, so we can do that review. And just included within that as well, there's obviously the follow-up reports that were undertaken on any previous audit plan work that's undertaken as well in the current financial year. So for the committee, it's a case of reviewing that, and as per the recommendation of the report, if happy, we can approve, or the committee can approve Appendix A, and that will be taken forward. Should the committee have any questions in line with the partnership arrangement that's due to go live from April 2024, the plan is that this plan is passed over to the Central Midlands Audit Partnership to undertake, and then in year, if there's a need to change that from a risk-based approach, that update will be provided to the committee audit to then review and update as and if needed. But this sets out a 12-month plan for the next financial year for the committee to review and, if happy, approve. Thank you, Chair.
I obviously forgot to read out the... Please turn your mobile phones to silent, Councillor Hartsell. Councillor Condacore, you wish to speak?
That working, yeah. A couple of things. Obviously, I was involved in the budget process, and lots of things come up out of that. Most notably, the lack of data on car parking. We seem not to have any decent data on actual ticket sales for the last couple of years. And I really think this is an area that the internal audit should look at as a matter of priority, because it is around £1 million we're talking about for ticket sales.
Councillor Condacore, have you read the report?
I've looked at the internal audit
Under
plan.
the follow-up reviews, car park management.
Yeah.
So we have got it noted to follow it up.
Yeah, it's the management, yeah.
That will include the data that you're looking for.
Yeah, but I say it's really important to do because we have a lack of data on how many tickets were sold.
So do I take it that on this particular item then you give us your endorsement? Because we've got it on the internal audit plan to follow it through.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to be allowed to speak for a few minutes, but you can
Well,
have your
just
follow-up question.
clarifying, because
Yeah,
you've
no,
just pointed something and it's in the plan, so I'm just wondering whether you endorse that particular part of the plan.
Yeah, I think it should be in the top list as an operation, as a follow-up review, because
Well, we've
There-
already reviewed it, so we're following it up. So we're
There-
checking the data that we've got.
there is a chronic lack of data being collected. We've got different spreadsheets and things to get different bits on. We believe we've got lots of fraud going on in terms of parking at places like the Rope Walk, potentially. And there doesn't seem to be a decent audit of how much we should collect against how much we are collecting. And some things like the Rope Walk, if we actually counted how many tickets we issued at the beginning of a day and how many end up being paid for at the other end of the day, we should see how many people are actually leaving the car park without paying in after the barriers are lifted up, things like that. So I'm plugging for a very decent review of car parking, because it's a big area I'm very concerned about. And when I tried to produce a budget, we had 2-year-old car parking data presented to us to base a budget on, because you do not, as a council, have decent, up-to-date data. The other thing I'd probably do less on this year is elections, because we're going to have multiple elections this year. I don't think having an audit of elections right in the middle of a general election, a PCC election, and this local authority election is necessarily the easiest time to do it. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to clarify that particular point on elections, Matt?
Yeah, so just to clarify that point, that will be post-May because of the implication we've got in terms of what's coming up in May and the timescales around that, notwithstanding the fact that there is corporately, there's obviously a push to make sure we get that right. So that review will take place after and be delayed in the later in the financial year.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, first of all, as expected on the election, but as soon as it's been done, it is prudent to do that audit, because there are some changes coming in. There are a lot of elections, as has been pointed out, and actually the voter ID side of things is very important. We want some assurance that people haven't been excluded, that has worked well, and that the democratic process has not been hindered by it. So I'm very pleased that's going ahead. I just wanted to check, you did say, obviously the provider, the partners that we're going to be going with later this year, has this been run by them at all? Have they had any sight or consultation of this? They have. Okay, that's great. I just wanted to check that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just to confirm that point, Councillor. So yes, they've seen and had an oversight in terms of what the current plan shows. And as I said earlier, if there's a need to change or propose an amendment to this in year, subject to any potential risk, that will be looked at and reported back to the committee as an amendment.
Yeah. And just for clarification as well, that was a point I raised this afternoon, and I had a conversation with Director Summerfield to make sure that as we've put out for external, internal auditors, that they were going to have some input into this plan to make sure that we're looking at the right areas that we need to do. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the operational and financial reviews, I was assured by the 151 officer that there was a mobile phone review going on, but I don't seem to see that listed anywhere. And at 4.2, it says, from the assessment, a risk score is allocated to each system. I think it'd be handy for this audit committee to have a look at the scoring matrix to see how we think things fit in for the reviews moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's something that we could facilitate, isn't it, Matt? That we get to have a look at the risk scoring matrix. So I think that, yeah.
Is that something you want to see for the current audit plan as presented, or just going forward, Councillor, just to clarify that point?
My apologies. It would be useful, I think, for the one we've currently started on.
If you're happy, Chair, we could circulate that as a brief note afterwards, if that's okay with the committee itself.
everybody in agreement with that? That we bring it as a briefing note afterwards? Yeah. Is there any other questions? In that case then, do we have a proposal that we accept the recommendations in this report? Councillor Hartshorn, Councillor Tromans, you have it a second. All those in favour? That's carried. Item number 7, Member Induction and Training Programme. Over to you to present that.
Thank you, Chair. So this report set out what we have down as a draft member induction and training programme for 2024-2025 in light of what's happening obviously in May. It is only a draft at this stage just for the committee to note, and then should the committee have any amendments or wish to include or amend anything that is drafted in table 1 of the report, then we're quite happy to have that discussion now, and then I can take away anything that is suggested, review that with officers, and then as per the report, subject to the outcome of that review, depending on what members would like to have included in that member induction training programme, in liaison with the chair of the Audit Standards Committee, look to refine that and then take that forward, unless you're happy as a committee with what's listed in Table 1. Table 1 does try to give an overview of the council, and I'm very mindful that I have sort of listed this in terms of if there was a new member that may need a complete overview of the council, just to make sure that they themselves have the best understanding of the council, but also potentially useful for any current member subject to May, whereby they might want some refresher training going forward as well. So it's effectively just a starting point for a conversation, and then subject to what the committee wish to do, we can then implement this, and it's not materially different to what's been done previously. I must stress that point. But if there is anything that members think actually it would be useful to have training specifically on certain items, then feel free to put those forward and we can take those away. And then in section 6 of the report, I have just listed there, just for members' benefit really, what the LGA provide in terms of training, whether that's e-learning or virtual or face-to-face sessions, just to be aware that we just need to be mindful not to potentially duplicate training, because it can be quite a costly and intense exercise, both for officers and members. So I think if in light of Table 1, if you do feel there is anything you wish to add, I would just stress to have a look at section 6 beforehand, just to make sure we're not duplicating. But if there's anything the committee wants specifically, happy to take that on board and take that away, or to answer any questions any members have. In terms of the delivery of the programme, we would envisage there being a bit of a dual/hybrid approach, where there might be requirements for face-to-face training and or virtual training or e-learning training, and subject to what the committee wish to do, we'll take that away and then start to formalise arrangements in terms of dates, times and the delivery mechanism for the training. But effectively it is it's quite similar to what's been done previously, but open the floor to any questions or queries or any amendments or suggestions anyone may have. Thank you, Chair.
I'll bring you in a minute, Councillor Tromans. Councillor Condicle.
I first did my members' introduction 12 years ago, and it's very, very useful to have the look around the council. In those days, we ran a minibus tour of council housing and etc. to show what went on. So I can't emphasise too much how important this training will be, particularly because we've got all-out elections, which will result in some wards having 2 new elected members. I mean, some wards are even totally new, so there's going to be a bigger changeover than normal, and there won't be the continuity, and elections by halves mean that you effectively have an understudy. You've always been someone who's the council who's still got 2 years to run and run for 2 years. So this is going to be the most important training programme probably for several decades at the council. It's really important we get councillors upskilled. I've seen many new councillors come in 2 years ago and them gradually learning how to do stuff and get more confident. And that's great, but we need to actually have some people landing on their feet and maybe even chairing a scrutiny committee or something without actually ever having gone to a meeting of the council before if there's a big changeover. So I really ask we do some training, particularly on the skills, chairing and effective scrutiny, because they do actually make councils work better and hopefully in a non-political way. So it is a big step. I mean, I remember how many sessions I had when I first joined. And the other problem we've got is getting new members to take up the training, because a lot of people, when we have new training events, do not attend them, which is most unfortunate. So trying to fit the timing in, or even having quite focused YouTube videos of some of maybe the training sessions, so that people who have busy lives, people who have children that need putting to bed or whatever in the evenings, they can access some of this training. And hopefully you've then got a resource for 2 years later if you have some training that explains how scrutiny works, how you raise motions, how you do whatever. If you actually start creating a library of training, it actually then starts to be something you can bank for future years. Thank you.
Just before you jump in, Rob, is it okay if I just ask a quick question? On the from 5 to 11, which of those are mandatory? Obviously, Audit and Standards Committee, if you're on the committee, that's mandatory training. Planning is mandatory, if you're in the Planning Committee. But are any of the others mandatory?
Just committees.
Just committees. Can I make a suggestion? And I don't know whether the committee feels, how the committee feels about this. But number 7, lone worker and health and safety training, I feel that should be a mandatory course for people to do. Particularly in the light of what we've all been getting emails about, I think that would be a valid point. And I think that maybe that should be a slightly more prioritised course than number 7. I don't know how anybody feels. Councillor Troman, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are some items on here where there's a statutory obligation on the council. They're in a quasi-judicial capacity, which licensing would be one of, planning is another. There's a requirement for all of the members that sit on those committees to have had the appropriate training before they take part in those committees. And the problem is we've done that as a minimum for the members and haven't done it for others, so that when we oh yeah, I'll sub for you, but have you had your planning training? Oh no. Well, then you can't take part, because otherwise, and we've had all sorts of problems with developers trying to challenge us on technicalities, trying to bring appeals, and actually, if a decision was made and the people there weren't appropriately qualified to be on there, because perhaps there was a substitute member, then that causes us all sorts of problems. So, Chair, I would recommend that as an absolute priority, the statutory requirement ones are focused on and made the priority for the training. That I know you want to deliver the licensing and the planning and whatever face to face, but if that can't be done, if there needs to be mop-up sessions, they need to be done very quickly and done by teams. We have to have not only all the committee members fully trained, but anyone who's likely to sub on those trained before the first meetings go ahead. So if they could be made an absolute priority, I take your point about the lone working and health and safety. I think that's very important. But the council, with respect, won't end up on the hook for huge costs or having done some breach if they take a few weeks to do. The licensing and the planning training, we absolutely have to have everybody trained before those committees are assembled. So if officers could confirm that they will be made a priority and that they will be delivered in whatever means is required to make sure the requisite number of people get the training, that would be much appreciated. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? Councillor Shepherd.
I do agree with the importance of the training. The lone working and the health and safety, I think, is a priority and should be pushed into the introduction and equipment day. As new councillors who could possibly be going into residents' homes or leaving this building, etc. I think it's quite important for them to realise how important it is to stay safe for themselves. In terms, you said 6 months catch up, I would suggest maybe that should be 3, because you do have a lot of questions after 3 months. You suddenly think, I never asked, and you're never quite sure maybe who to go to. So I think 3 months would be ideal time for people to engage. And yes, we should be offering. I'm not fond of teams, but in terms of training, I think it fits in with people's needs, and I think it's something we should consider. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kovacevic.
Yeah, thank you. It's probably just to reiterate some of what's already been said by the previous two speakers. So obviously where we've got mandatory committees which you have to have attended training, again, I would like to see those done, because last time round we literally had those meetings within days of members being elected, so there's a real rush to get those done, and we need to ensure that people are. But also further to that, as was already alluded to, we need to make sure that every council has the opportunity and appreciates the reason why they need to do this training in case they ever do need to sub. And we have been almost caught out on a couple of occasions on certainly the planning committee, where we've had councillors that we've had to say, oh no, actually you haven't done that. And I would also like to sort of add, could we have a readily viewable database that we could view as councillors or as chairs of committees to ensure that when people are coming in front of us, we can actually see who has done the training and who hasn't. And I think that would be very useful, and we can just sort of then head off any issues before they become issues in terms of substitutions. My second point is to do with conduct, and I would like to see more training done on how councillors should conduct themselves, both in the chamber and also including training on things like the use of social media. I think that's seriously important. We're getting a lot of issues where there's a lot of toxicity around various issues going on. A lot of it comes from either social media, and councillors maybe not necessarily always knowing how to best handle that, or actually sometimes councillors going online and inflaming a situation, which I don't see that as being their job. But also then how we conduct ourselves here, because when the public do watch it, they take their cues from us. And if we're not behaving in an appropriate manner in here, then how on earth can we expect them to then sort of maintain similar standards in public, or if they come across us in sort of real life? Thank you.
I think we've raised the point on social media training before in this committee as well, and certainly at subcommittees. And I think it's a very important thing that we look at social media conduct, because what you put out there can be seen by anybody, and if you put the wrong thing out there, that's going to lead to more complaints. So I think that we need to have a look at some kind of social media training, and I quite like Councillor Shepherd's idea of trying to include that, even if you included the lone worker element of the health and safety training in that induction day, because that is important, because from the day you're elected you could be going out to meet people by yourself. So I think you need to have an understanding of what risks you're taking. And the only other thing I was going to suggest was, if you actually look at the corporate governance training, session 2, would it be worth taking the bribery, gifts and hospitality element of that and fitting it in with session 1, because I think it probably fits better.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. Just because that's what we've done in the past doesn't mean to say it can't change going forward. So we'll take that away. We'll have a look at the social media point as well, and look into that and report back. There may even be some external standard training on that potentially that's more focused around general social media for councillors. And I think just to clarify the point, that the table set out isn't in any order of priority. Just to clarify that point, it was just to provide it on paper, and then what we'll do, subject to obviously the comments made, we'll take that away, we'll start to programme that in, because I'm very mindful of the point around availability, and we are currently working on the timetable for next municipal year as well. So the plan will be, following this committee meeting, to take that away, take the comments on board, update the table, and then to start really putting forward dates so people are aware of that at least 2 months in advance. Thank you, Chair.
I think the other point that Councillor Kovacevic made was a good one, particularly as a chair of a committee or a vice chair, is to be able to see who's done the training, so that if you're getting apologies from councillors and people are stepping forward, it's an easy review to just say, yes, that person can sit on the committee.
Agree, yeah, good comment. We'll take that forward. Thank you.
Any other questions? In that case then, are members happy to accept the recommendations, and if so, does that receive a proposer? Councillor Kovacevic. Councillor Cooper, you happy to second? All those in favour? That's carried. Item 8, any other business? Councillor Condacourt, would you like to speak?
Chair, I only put down to speak in case there was any other business, because as you know, if I don't ask in advance, then I can't then respond to anything that happens. So if there's no any other business, then I don't need to speak.
In that case then, I shall draw this meeting to a close and thank everybody for your attendance this evening.